Bob, what's going on? Yeah. So this the our 10-minute speaker, y'all know one thing that I find attractive about our fellowship is the message and the enthusiasm that comes with the message. You know, when you meet someone who, or you hear someone share who loves the fellowship, you know, that kind of leans me into them and intrigues me about them. And I heard this guy share and just his love for the process, you know, and him and service to the fellowship also is a big thing. It just made me totally attracted to him. I was like, I gotta get this guy's number, man, and listen to this guy. So enough out of me. I'm going to introduce to you now Anthony. Over to you, Doc.
He's Derek, Anthony, an alcoholic. Hey, family. I call us family because of the bonds we share. In these rooms are much closer than any DNA test we can produce. Derek, I introduce people and I put them, I guess I might get them nervous with a nice introduction because that was a nice introduction. You got me nice and nervous. But there's nothing to be nervous about. I have faith. I don't have fear today. You know, the first 3 steps to me is basically when I realized that I can't, I need a higher power that can, and I'll let them. You know, I had a spiritual program growing up, and my God today is much bigger from these rooms. So, you know, for me, I did these steps as a natural process. This is the same thing my mother and grandmother tried to teach me. Okay, you can call it in many different ways. This message is one. The truth is one. It's in many programs, many spiritual practices, many cultures around the world, called many different ways. So how it happened for me is I got myself into the lowest form of humanity one last time. That was the last time I kept digging. To make it quick, because I got 10 minutes. And I'm looking at the clock now. I got myself a restraining against my family. And I had to almost burn everything to the ground. And so when a friend who went through the same thing, who had done some meetings, but doesn't practice in the program, but was trying to explain to me this is all alcohol based. And I was like, really? And I gave him all the reasons why it wasn't. And he's like, okay, well, until you believe, you know, the quick version is he was like, if you won't believe it till you believe it. I could get 5,000 people to tell you 5,000 ways. He's like, but if you want this to stop, you should stop drinking. But till then, drinks are on me tonight. What does an alcoholic like more than drinking on someone else's tap? So I got a glass of sake. And as I'm drinking that glass of sake, I took step 1 because I was thinking about how unmanageable my life had become. I'm like, wow, look at where I've gotten myself. From the lowest form, one of the lowest form of humanity, I got myself a restraining order. You know, my unmanageable wasn't even the word. I couldn't believe who I'd become. I was so afraid of what my next drink was going to be like that it was less scary to tell the world I don't drink. I'm in the bar and restaurant in the street, all blah, 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 blah. Drinking's every part of my life. It was. So I was like, how am I going to tell people I'm not drinking? Well, I'm going to tell them, because if I drink again, I don't know what I could do. And that's when I realized my life was unmanageable and I was powerless over it. Because my buddy had over 3 years and his life completely changed around. And I didn't know the story. He didn't tell it to me until it happened to me the same way. So that end of that glass of sake, I looked in the cup and I was going to order another one. And I realized how scary it would be if I kept drinking. So I put the glass down over 2.5 years ago. That's when I did step 1, before I knew it was step 1. Step 2 was when I was, and I read this often in the book, you know, that part is my miracle, our Southern friend Fritz. You know, I had it come quickly to me because I had a spiritual belief most of my life and I lost it. But I was able to re-believe. And in that passage in the Gnostics where it talks about our Southern friend who has a sudden spiritual awakening, I all of a sudden was thinking about the miracles that happened in my life. My brother got out of a wheelchair stricken with polio through my mother's faith and belief in a higher power. Long story, it's a miracle. The doctor said it. I've seen miracle after miracle happen through my mother's faith. And I was like, could all those people who had faith be wrong? And just like in the story of our Southern friend, I questioned, like, was I wrong or was everyone else wrong? And I was able to re-believe again. And that's when I realized that a power greater than myself could And I started praying again for the first time in years because I became a self-made atheist or agnostic, whatever you want to call me. I didn't believe in any God, so I didn't want accountability. So when I finally was able to re-believe in God, I did step 2 and 3 in the same motion because I was able to re-believe. I believed in a power greater than myself. I started praying again. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't praying for a pinch hit in the night, like it says in the book. I wasn't praying to get another car, a better job, another this, because I can't fill any hole with all these things I kept collecting. I collected a lot of things. I was a successful drone. And here we go. I'm like, I finally started filling the hole with the right things, a belief in a higher power. And then I started praying for me to be a better husband, a better father, a better employer, an employee. I started praying to be a human again. I said, God, please remove this deep darkness from my soul, this willing to die, this death, and let me just get up and be a human again. I'll do whatever. I'll start at the bottom. I'll start at the top, where you need me. Just let me stop dying. Let this death take away. I surrendered. I was on my knees for the first time in my life for a long time. I grew up with a faith. And that's step 1, 2, and 3. It happened before I got into the program. That's how this program works. The boys that made this program didn't have the steps like we have it laid out. These are the cliff notes of many spiritual practices that I understood, but didn't understand the way it's explained in these cliff notes of life. And so all of a sudden, I'm like doing the things we do. I did a 4th step by with my higher power, like playing a video I couldn't get away. I did 5 and 6 by admitting all that, telling a spiritual advisor. And then I couldn't practice the 12th step because I couldn't find a way to be a part of this. And I skipped through all the way to 12, but that's how I found out AA. God led me into AA on my first year. This was read for me, and I'm going to end right here. This is how my spiritual awakening happened from being able to really believe in it. I'm going to read it quick. Our Southern friend was a minister's son. He attended church school where he became rebellious of what he thought was an overdose of religious education. He therefore was dogged by trouble, frustration, business failure, insanity, fatal illness, suicide, calamities that immediately embedded his family and depressed him. Post-war disillusionment, every serious alcoholism, impending mental and physical collapse brought him to the point of self-destruction. That explains my life. 99%. One night when he was confined in a hospital, I was confined in a friend's house because I got myself a restraining order. He was approached by someone who had a spiritual experience, another alcoholic. For me, it was other friends. His Gorge Rose said, there is no God, and if there's a God, he has certainly done nothing for me. Later on in this room, he was questioning, is it possible all these people are wrong? Did he have that all these people were wrong about the religious experiences they had? When he thought of it, all of a sudden, like a thunderbolt, a great thought came to mind. Who are you to say there is no God? Didn't happen exactly like that with Charleston Heston saying it, but it was like the awakening happening. I started praying again. And it says this man recounts the tumbling to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by the conviction of the presence of God. It poured over him and through him with a certain majesty, a great tide of flood. The barriers he had built through the years were swept away. He stood in the presence of an infinite power of love. He stepped from bridge to shore the first time he lived in conscious companionship with his creator. I got to experience it just like that. I can't explain it any better. This was read to me in my first meeting on my 1-year anniversary at a Big Book study. Thus, our friend's cornerstone was fixed in place. No later vicissitude has shaken it. His alcohol problem was taken away that very night years ago. It disappeared for a few brief moments of temptation. The drink has never returned. Such times, a great revulsion has risen up, and he seemingly could not drink if he would. God had restored his sanity. What is this but a miracle of healing? Yes, its elements are simple. Circumstances made him willing to believe. He humbly offered himself to his maker that he knew. Even so, as God restored us all to our right minds, to this man the revelation was sudden. Some of us who grow into it more slowly, but he has come to all who have honestly sought him. When we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. That's how this program and these first 3 steps will get you to this experience. My name's Anthony. I'm an alcoholic. Thanks for letting me share.
My friend.
Thank you. My name is Michael and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is May 7th of 2011. My home group is the New Orleans Men's Group, and we meet Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock. So if you're ever are in town in New Orleans, come and check us out. I appreciate being here. Thanks for the chance, the opportunity to be of service. Yeah, so I'm the real deal, a real alcoholic, and I also really believe in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the way I was raised in this program. My sponsor is he would have come in first place with the challenge there, and he loves the book, and that's the way I came up in this program, and the way I take others through the steps is the first 4 chapters, the doctor's opinion, Bill's story, there's a solution, more about alcoholism, are mainly about the first step. They are really the first step, is where I'm actually able to recognize and accept my powerlessness and the unmanageability of my life. And then after you read these 4 chapters and you get into the 5th chapter of the book, We Agnostics. That is, if you consider, I consider the doctor's opinion, chapter 1. Just in case you didn't get it, the previous chapters, right? Just in case, like it was written for me, right? It asks one more time, as if when honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control of the amount you take, then you're probably alcoholic. And that be the case for me. Here I am about to go into step 2. I'm about to read We Agnostics, and they're like, hang on, alcoholic, let's just make sure that we're here, right? Let's make sure that we're in acceptance and put it simply for you, if you cannot quit entirely, you have little control of the amount you take, you're probably one of us, A few years back, the AA Grapevines meeting in print. AA magazine, for those who may not know, had this April Fool's edition. And in the back, they had some funny things that you could answer, 4 questions. The title of it is, you're an alcoholic when. And then they had 4, samples of what it would look like if you're an alcoholic. And the last one was if you pay for your 40 in nickels and dimes. And man, that hit so hard. I was like, how rude. I felt that so bad. I'm like, God, I've been reading this book, man. You just put it so simple like that. Yeah, I figured it out, man. And that was me, right? There was a period of my drinking. I lived in Chicago. I lived about 100 yards from the liquor store. I was there, when they opened, and I would go in with like a pocket full of change, and I would throw it down. I'd grab what I needed and I'd throw it down on the counter, and I'd take it and I, jet out, but I had too much pride to stand there and watch them count the change, and I was probably always, dime or 2 short anyway, so I'd go back to my place and they weren't even my nickels and dimes, they were yours, It was a period, I started drinking at 18 years old, man. And there's a part in the book, in the doctor's opinion, if you're interested. And it says that we're restless, irritable, and discontented unless we can again experience that sense of ease and comfort, which comes at once by taking a few drinks, right? That's what it felt. That's how it felt for me, right? There's absolutely nothing that I could do till I had that. Once I got in that place, then I could, fill in the blank, get up, go to school, go to work, talk, whatever it was. But I needed that first, I needed to have that first. When I was in college, I had I was living in the dorms, and there was, we were drinking, of course, and all my friends drink, but I didn't know how to stop, right? And so I it was during homecoming, and made a mess in the dorms. I think I tore up some posters, in a blackout. And the RA came to my room that next morning, and he says, "Hey, Michael, man, you've got to go see the dean. Dean wants to see you." I'm like, oh shoot, it was like you got to be there at 9:30, and I get up and I make that trip across campus. And she was actually the very first person to ask whether or not I thought that I had a problem with alcohol, and she said to me, I go in her office and, we talk a little bit, and she's like, "Michael, do you think that you have a problem with alcohol?" And I remember like being really offended that she would ask that question. I'm like, of course not. I was like, no, I don't think that I have a problem with alcohol at all. And she says, "Well, have you been drinking this morning?" Stupid question. Of course I had, because I didn't know how not to, right? Like if she thought that I was going to be able to get up, walk across campus to her office, knowing that I'm about to suffer some sort of consequence and not have a little something in me first, she was stupid. There was absolutely no way that I could do that, and I didn't know how not to drink. It was such a part of me. I needed it. And it made everything okay, and it quieted everything, and it made you okay, it made me okay. There was a period when I would hang out in bars all the time, and I was there in the morning, and I was in the bar in the morning when they opened up, and I was in the bar when the people came in for lunch, and they'd eat their lunch and maybe have a beer or a drink or something. Like people do that. I was still there, and I was there when those same people got off work for happy hour. I was still there, and then when I was still there when my favorite people came in, my service industry people, my folks, right? Because they partied. And with all of those people, I was something different. Alcohol made me be whomever I wanted to be. But more importantly than that, it made me be whomever you wanted me to be. And I was everything. I've been a lawyer, I've been an author, which is partly true, but I've never written a book. I do have some stuff published. I've been, I remember this lady telling me one time that I had long piano fingers, and I was a classical pianist for like a year and a half after that. I've been a pilot, and until I met a pilot. Like I have an uncle who's a pilot, so I know a lot of the lingo. And then I met a pilot. Then I was like, I can't use that one more. I've been everything. It's like whomever you wanted me to be, it just made everything okay. And for me, I had to reach a place that was pretty low. Alcohol, took things away, and it kept taking things away. And then again, there's another part in that same paragraph that I read earlier. It says its alcoholic life seems the only normal one. That's what it was like for me, right? Is that I would adjust my level of life to wherever it was that my disease took me to, right? There was never an objective step back and say, hey, you know what, Michael, this isn't good for you, or what you're doing is not healthy, or don't you want more? It's like, okay, so now I don't have a job. Now I have to learn how to hustle. Okay, well, now I got kicked out of my place. Now I've got to, do this couch surfing thing. Oh, now I have burned all these bridges and I have nowhere to go. So now I have to live like as a homeless man. I would just sort of adjust to wherever it is that the disease took me to, and finally, when I was, I'll tell this story really quickly. I was living in this apartment. My landlord came to me and he said, Michael, listen, you're not paying your rent, but I really like you. Really, really good guy, but I got to kick you out, and I don't want to do the whole court thing. He said, so why don't you just take all of your belongings and put them in the storage in the basement? And when you get yourself settled, you can come back and you can grab your things and they'll be safe there. And I said, okay. and I left and went from one friend's house, another friend's house, another friend's house, another friend's house. And one day I was making my way back to that apartment. And I lived in the northwest side of Chicago, and my friends lived in the southwest side of Chicago. And if you're familiar with Chicago, it is a huge city. And I had no money, and I was walking, and I was going from train station to train station, hoping there was an attendant there so I could jump the turnstile and make it to on the train. And every train station had an attendant there, so I had to walk all the way to this apartment building, and I got a few blocks away, and I saw a sign, and it said yard sale, 2627 Wester Trail. And I was like, oh, that's my address. The girls in the front, I lived in the back, there were some girls in the front. I said, the girls in the front must be having a yard sale. And I kept walking, and then I saw it again. This one had glitter all over it. It said yard sale, 2627 Wester Trail. It was at that moment I was like, oh shit, please, God, do not let this be my stuff that these people are selling. So I go get to the place, I walk down the alley because I'm in the back, and sure enough, like all of my stuff's like all over the place. Half of it's gone. It's like, it's a mess back there. How dare they do that to me? How dare they do that to me? Look at what they have done to me. I'm a huge baseball fan. I've got lots of baseball paraphernalia, and nobody wanted a couple of my baseball bats. And I remember I was seeing a baseball bat, I picked it up, and I started breaking every window in that apartment. Next thing you know, I have a Chicago Police Department, my landlord and my best friend staring at me in the face, screaming like, what is wrong with you? There is something not right here. You need help. And my best friend, Christopher, is his name, and he said to me, he goes, you're going to go to rehab. And I'm crying, loaded, drunk. And I said to him, I was like, okay. What time are we going to go tomorrow? I'm going to go. What time are we going to go tomorrow? He said, no, we're not going tomorrow. It's like, we're going right now. Right now, you are going to rehab. So I get into this rehab called Haymarket, and I go in there, and I get straight A's in rehab because I'm good, right? I'm really good. I don't know how to be honest, and I'm a fantastic bullshitter and manipulator. And so after a month or so in this rehab, people come up to me and they say, you are fantastic. You are a great example of what it means to be a good steward of this place. And you're a good example to all of these other people here. So we're going to give you a treat. Here's a pass for 8 hours. Go to the beach, take a walk, whatever it is that you want to do, have some lunch, go ahead, just come back in 8 hours, you've earned this. I said, thank you so much. And I took that pass, and I did exactly what they told me to do. The only thing is that I came back about 14 or 15 hours later, and there's some other stuff that I did in the meantime. And I snuck into this rehab, and I get into my room, and I could hear them running down the hallway. I could hear the footsteps running. And they get to my room, and they're like, where have you been? I'm like, what do you mean, where have I been? I've been right here. I'm here. I've been here the entire time. They're like, you have not been here. Like, yes, I've been here. They're like, you have not been here. And you've been drinking. And I'm like, I have not been drinking. And the little thing in rehab is like, hey, do you know that like you can't smell vodka? You can smell vodka. And they're like, you've been drinking, you can smell it. It's all the way, down the hallway. And I said, you gotta go. You can't stay here. And they kicked me out of this rehab. I'm 29 years old, and I'm standing in front of this rehab. My life is reduced to a duffel bag. Everything that I own, I could fit into a duffel bag. And I called my parents. And my mom answered the phone. And I asked her for $800. Now, I will say this, my parents are great people, I love them, they're fantastic, but they're also my biggest enablers. And I knew who I could go to. And I called them and I asked my mom answered, I asked her for $800. And she said no. And I said to her, I was like, oh, God, because she was the harder one You know, I was like, put my dad on the phone. My dad, I could always get anything out of him. I was like, put my dad on the phone. She goes, okay. So she puts my dad on the phone, and I asked him for $800, and he said no. He said, no, we're not giving you any more money. You're on your own. You're gonna have to figure this out. At this point, I am standing in front of this rehab. It is in Chicago, and it is the month of October. Terrible timing of this, because the weather's about to change. October can still be okay-ish, you know, but it's about to get real, and it's a bad time to be homeless. And so I have this, you know, my bag, and I'm like, what am I gonna do here? And I go to this homeless shelter, and they, you know, they let me in, and one of the people at the homeless shelter told me there was a good way that I could earn some money. And they're like, you know, get up really early in the morning and come outside and just stand outside. And there are these vans that'll come and pick you up, and they'll pick you up and they'll drop you off in a place in the city. You'll sell newspapers, and then they'll pick you up after a few hours, and they'll take part of the money, and then you'll have the rest, right? It reminds me again of adjusting my level of life to wherever it is that my disease took me to, right? And then in Chicago, there's two newspapers, Chicago Tribune, Chicago Sun-Times. And the guy tells me, he says, hey, make sure that you get on the Chicago Tribune, right? Because the Tribune, you'll make more money. And I'm like, absolutely not. That newspaper is too conservative for me. I'm getting on the Chicago Sun-Times van because that's the newspaper that I read. And again, try to hold on to some sort of normality when nothing is, right? And so I did. I got on this Chicago Sun-Times van, and they dropped me off in the city in the middle of winter and freezing. I've got a little bottle of something in my Chicago Sun-Times vest, which I still have to this day, by the way. And I have a little bottle of something, and it's so cold, and I'm, you know, trying to, you know, drink liquor and sell newspapers. I'm pissing on myself because I can't get to a bathroom, and I did that for a little bit, and I just couldn't do it anymore. You know, I didn't come into Alcoholics Anonymous because I looked at my life and said, this isn't right. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, I made the initial approach to Alcoholics Anonymous because I was just so damn cold. I couldn't take it anymore. And I called my parents, and I said, hey, I really need help. And my dad said, we're not giving you any money if that's what you think. And he says, give us a call tomorrow. We'll have something planned out for you. And so I called him the next day, and my dad said that you have a one-way ticket to New Orleans, and you're going to go to New Orleans, and you're going to, your aunt, my mom is from New Orleans, so I've got some relatives here, and you're going to stay with your aunt, and you're going to go to rehab. And I came to New Orleans, and I stayed with my aunt, and did everything but rehab, right? And I got dropped off at that rehab. I'd run around the corner and, you know, come back and give an excuse. Oh, well, they said tomorrow, or, oh, well, you know, so full of fear. And finally, you know, and then I thought that, hey, if I just sort of like, you know, what I needed was law school. And, you know, so I decided that I was going to go to law school, and I signed up to take a class that would help you with the LSAT, the test to get into law school. And I couldn't go to that because they kicked me out of that because I was too drunk. And finally, my aunt was like, you have to do something because you can't stay here anymore. And so I go to this rehab, and I get into this rehab, and they told me that I needed to have a sponsor within the first 30 days of being there. And this was a long-term rehab. And I went to, you know, we hear a lot in our AA, you know, in the AA lexicon, of find somebody who's got what you want, you know. Well, I don't know. That didn't work for me. What I wanted was certainly not what I needed. I went to a meeting and I saw a guy share at a meeting up on this huge meeting in New Orleans. It's called Big Easy, and this guy, was sharing a story, and he was from Chicago. He was good looking. He loved baseball and music. I'm like, my God, this is God sending. This is what I need. Actually, I think at some point I may have sponsored him, but after the meeting, I went to this guy and I said, hey, will you be my sponsor? And he's like, absolutely, yeah. Here's my number. Give me a call. And I called him maybe 10, 12 times, and he never answered. But there was a guy that was coming around this rehab that I really felt sorry for, because he was always there. And I was like, this poor guy, it's like he really needs a life. Why is he always at this rehab? I kind of feel sorry for him, And the irony of it all is that those people at that same rehab probably think that I need a life now because I'm always there. But I felt sorry for him, and I'm like, man, but it was day 29. And I didn't want to, if you don't have a sponsor within the first 30 days, yeah, you're get a restriction and you're restricted in a lot of things that you can do. And this guy, he was always there, and he had this rickety white van, and you could hear it coming like a couple blocks away. You knew he was coming. It was very loud. He had like milk crates and tires in the back, no seats or anything. But he was always there. And I was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to ask that guy because I know he'll be here. So I stepped into the little yard outside the rehab, and I'm pacing back and forth, chain smoking cigarettes. And I'm like, God, I need that guy to show up because I don't want a restriction and I don't have anybody to ask. And I could hear his truck coming, his van coming. I'm like, he's coming. And then he shows up, and I asked him to sponsor me. And he asked, are you serious about your recovery? And I was like, yes, I'm serious. He goes, okay, I'll be your sponsor. I'm like, okay, give me your number and all this stuff because I have to repeat it, and they're gonna ask me. And he's my sponsor today, actually. And what he did was he took me through the steps, and he not only did he take me through the steps and we read, but he showed me how to be a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And my sponsor's like one of those guys, he'll grab the big book, and he's always at the homeless shelter. He's always like under the bridge, trying to get guys and read with them, get them help, and et cetera, et cetera. And he would put me in that white van and say, hey, here's where we're going. We're going to homeless shelter. You got to speak at the homeless shelter. You got to talk to these guys. We're going underneath the bridge. I got to go pick up so-and-so. He's over there on Felicity Street, man. We got to grab him. We got to go. Like, man, it was so much of that like when I got my very first sponsee, I called my sponsor. I'm like, can I sponsor this guy? Like, this guy's got a job. I mean, like, what am I supposed to do with him? I didn't know, man. And, but he showed me what to do. And like, we were always at book studies and going through the book and picking up guys and really, really being, active in the program, one of the things that I've learned for myself, like, during this process is how much, when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, my family, the book talks about the fraud, the emotional appeal, and that idea that, like, if you only loved me enough, or look at what you're doing to your mother, or you've got these kids, and the one that I would get all the time that I hated, and you might as well call me a piece of shit when you say it, is that, Michael, you've got so much potential. Screw you, right? I hated that, and none of that works. None of that works. That idea of like, I love my family, I will do anything for my family, but quit drinking, no, is that I can't do that. That is something that I can't. That is the powerlessness. That is how powerful alcohol is. That is that is the thing that I am powerless over. I remember coming in and like, I think sometimes, you can read the literature you could probably say that, like, when you're reading Bill's story, that perhaps Bill had a problem with this, with the second step and God, but not really. Bill had a problem with the first step, right? The first step of the 6 tenets of the Oxford group was deflation of ego. And that is the step that Bill had the most difficulty with. That was the one that he could not accept, right? And that, the idea of for me of a higher power, I never had a problem with that. However, I never had a relationship with that thing, right? It was always like I grew up as a Christian only because that's not anything that I chose for myself. That was chosen for me. But when I was an adult, I never walked into a church and said, hey, there was never a morning where I would say, hey, you know what? I really feel like going to church today. Never, ever, ever, right? And my idea of God was like, God when, God please, God how, God now, God hurry, God. When I was in some sort of bind, that's when I reached out to that power that's greater than me. When I was, there was one day I was walking from a friend's house back to, my apartment. I was always broke, and I remember I was walking, to my apartment, and I found a bag of marijuana on the ground, huge bag. I mean, like a lot of weed. And I picked it up and I'm looking around. I'm like, oh my God, right? And I picked it up and I thanked God from the bottom of my heart. I was like, thank you, God. And I took about 20 sort of steps, and I found some rolling papers out of it. It was just like a miracle, And I would say that, and I could hear my mom's like, that's not God. God wouldn't send you some weed. My God would. Yes, he would. Absolutely. Because what I've learned in this process is that my higher power meets me where I am. And there are tons of opportunities for me to grow from that point. Right. And that's what I discovered in this program. I remember, so that was God for me. Like, oh my God, yes, absolutely. This is exactly what I needed so that I don't feel what I'm going through right now. Thank you, God. Right. Fast forward some years later, when I'm in this rehab and we have this group, right? Like this group, and our counselor's like, okay, I want you to pick a song that means a lot to you in your recovery, and I'll print out the words and everybody will read the words and you'll talk about why you love this song. And I'm like, oh God, I'm cheesy, but I do really good in rehab. And so I chose Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror. One of my favorites, right? And I got a lot of flack for choosing that song. A lot of the guys chose Eminem, and all those rap songs and stuff. But I was like, I really like the song. Go through and I describe, I talk about why, why I chose that song. Because if I'm going to make any change in the world, it's got to start with Michael, right? And then this one day, I'm out of rehab, and a few days out, my sponsor's like, hey, listen, I want you to come and share your story with these guys. In the homeless shelter, it's the crews, what they call them, those who stay in the homeless shelter, and they kind of help run it. Because I want you to come tell your story to the crew. I'm like, guys, like 8:30, be there. So I parked my car in the parking lot. I get out, it's cold outside, and I'm watching these people who are not the crew, who have to leave the homeless shelter. They're sitting on these benches. They've got their belongings next to them, and they, are covered in their jackets and blankets and stuff. And I'm looking at these people, I'm like, my goodness, I'm not so far removed from that, right? And now I'm actually telling my story to these people. And I walk in and I tell my story, nobody's listening. And I, say goodbye to my sponsor, and I walk to my car, and I'm walking down the stairs, and I'm seeing these people again, and I get into my car, and I turn on the radio, and Man in the Mirror is just coming on. Now, today I look back at that and go, okay, you know, I've had so many experiences in 11 years that like, okay, cute, right? But it was so profound at the time because what I've learned is that my high power will meet me where I'm at. Here's where I am, right? And that is what I needed at that moment. That was a spiritual experience for me at that moment. It is exactly what I needed. And I think throughout this process, that continues to happen. And that's that power that's greater than myself that keeps showing up in my life where I need them and when I need them at the time. And so you know, I do this thing and you know, work these steps. And you know, my fourth step, I wrote it out and I had it highlighted, and I used a ruler, and I had everything clean and neat and beautiful. And I go and it was all color coded, and I go and present it to my sponsor, and picks it up, and he tears it up. And he's like, "This is not for me. You are not doing this to impress me. You're doing this because this is what you need to do." Is what I figured out. What I learned is that, you know, anybody ever seen that show Hoarders? And it's like one of those shows that I watch in secret. I don't like to let too many people know that I watch it, right? So it's you go to somebody's house, and they've got stuff from the floor to the ceiling in every room, and it's like they can't move around, and like it's nasty, it smells bad, it's gross, um and when somebody comes to the door and they knock on the door, they can't come in. They can't come in because there's no space for them. There's no room to sit. There's no room to congregate. There's no room. And that's exactly what I brought to the table when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. It's exactly what it's like. I can't let you in because there's so much stuff on the inside. There's no room for you. There's no room for that relationship with the power that's greater than myself until I start to clean that stuff up. And that is what it was explained to me by my sponsor. And that's what I give to my sponsees. Nobody's for me. What a high power looks like today is you, right? Like I can't see me. You allow me to see me. You allow me to be better in my life in so many ways. And so when I come in, I need to make room to allow you in. And that's what the fourth step is. It's like cleaning that so that I can let others into my life. You see, because addiction is a very lonely place, right? And so I've got to make some room for you. And that's what that, you know, that fourth and fifth step was like for me. My parents, you know, I listened to all these stories about making amends and all, and you know, I was not eager. That was the difficult part for me, was the amends. And I heard you know, people say, yeah, you know, and I went to my family, and my parents was like, oh, we love you, just continue to do what you do. That wasn't the case with me, with my parents. You know, I came and I was ready, and you know, and I made an amends to them, and they had stuff for me to do. You know, they had a list of things they wanted me to do, and they wanted their money back. And I'm like, wait, you don't understand? Like, you're taking this literally. Like, you're not supposed to say that. You know what I mean? Like, it was crazy. But I will say this. I'll leave it with this. And working with others has probably been the best part of this whole thing for me. You know. And you know, started, you know, working with these guys, and it's so hard to put into words, but they have been the best part of me. They have made me a better man in so many ways. You know, when I first, you know, worked with the sponsor, you know, I didn't know how to love another individual. You know, I mean, I love my family, you know, but that's almost by default. Right? Like, how do you choose to love somebody? How do you choose to love fellow man? And when you have to show up and be there and listen to the fourth step of somebody who is pouring out their heart and sharing their story with you, how could you not love them? You know, and you know, at first I made tons of mistakes. I had this one guy in a rehab, and you know, we decided that he needed, excuse me, to work on humility. And I told him, stop shaking hands with people, that whenever you see people, just do that, bow, you know, and like, man, he got ripped in the rehab. And one of the guys in the rehab was like, hey, like, did you tell Jacob to bow at people? I'm like, oh my God, I'm screwing up, you know. But the thing is, 90% of sponsorship, you know, is showing up. And I've gotten more from this program by giving it away. I'll end with this. There is, how I see it is that I've been to a lot of conventions, I've spoken, I've done a lot of stuff in the program, been around a bit. I have never heard it explained and put into words 100% accurate. I have never heard someone say, hey, listen, here are the rewards. Here's what happens to you. Like, here's how this all works, right? Never. I've heard some, I think we get as close as we can, right? But it's such a personal journey. It is something that is so unique to the individual that there are no words for it. However, I think that there's a place in the book that gets really, 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 really close. And I'd like to share that with you. If you're interested, it's on page 128. So after, you know, the first 104 pages, everything like 2 wives, employees, and family actors, what we do is that we apply the principle of the program, the principle to what we are working on, right? I may not be an employer or employee, but the principle of what's being said is I can apply. So here it is on page 128. And the family is the last paragraph. The family is talking about dad, right? And dad is just like, hey, listen, he's sober, man. Like, why isn't he paying attention to us? What the heck's wrong with dad, man? Right? His dad's off. And it says, the book says, he is not so unbalanced as you might think. Many of us have experienced dad's elation. We have indulged in spiritual intoxication. Like a gaunt prospector belt drawn in over the last ounce of food, our pig struck gold, right? Gaunt literally for me when I came in here. Gold is the program. Joy at our release from a lifetime of frustration knew no bounds. Father feels that he has struck something better than gold. For a time, he may try to hug the new treasure to himself. He may not see at once that he has barely scratched a limitless load, which will pay dividends only if he mines it for the rest of his life and insists on giving away the entire product. Beautiful. I mine it for the rest of my life, and every time it pays off, I give it all away. And I think that's what this is all about. And that's how I try to live and be a part of this program. Fall short, but I try. Thanks for letting me share.